Well, football fans, the Big D is back with a Week 14 Tiers. That's right, Tiers edition of the Big D podcast. Before I bring in the Tiers girl herself, please subscribe, like, and share the Spunky Spectrum Sports YouTube page. See all my content, UFC, football, World Cup. Also check out the Big D podcast for all your audio listeners on Spotify and Apple. So joining us today is my friend, the Tears girl herself, Megan Scoop. So Megan, Week 14 Tears. What's with all the teams on bye weeks, and it just makes it harder to make Tears line, right?
Yeah, we talked about that pre-show. A lot of teams on bye this week, but when you think about it, there's still a lot of the good fantasy teams that aren't on bye. But what I'm struggling with this week that we didn't talk about yet is it's a lot of divisional matchups. There's 7 divisional games this week, and typically divisional games go under. And we talked about one game in particular, and I'm sure we're going to get into it, but there's only one game that I really have high hopes to go over the total, really have some fantasy points. The other divisional games, I don't know. I think if you're watching Red Zone this weekend, it could be a little slow. They may need to find some filler there at Red Zone, because I think we're going to lack some scoring. I think scoring's down this year, but I think scoring could be down even further this week with all these divisional matchups. I think that makes tiers even harder this week.
I think scoring's down because the Denver Broncos are playing this year.
Absolutely. That's not helping, that for sure. And they're playing this week in a divisional matchup against the Chiefs. So, the divisional games, they just always feel like a slugfest, feel like they go under a lot. I don't have the percentages in front of me of what the percentage of divisional unders have hit this season, but it sure feels like it. They hit under a lot, and sometimes really far under the total. So I don't know. I'm struggling with that in tiers this week to see where there's going to be points.
I think Denver's gone under in every game but one this year.
Whew. Just never would have seen that coming. That was just really, really a rough scene out there.
Okay, it's been a while, so Megan, explain the process you use to make tiers lineups every weekend.
Sure. I do a tiers show every week on the Fanspeak Network, and then I do my tiers picks on fanspeak.com, and we also have a tiers simulator where I plug in my favorite plays, my core plays, and it just gives you kind of lineup suggestions for tiers. But for those that don't know, if you haven't played tiers before, in the main slate, it's 8 tiers. And so tier 1 and tier 5 are quarterback tiers, and the other tiers are, kind of a mix of running back, receiver, and tight end. And you're basically just looking for the top scorer in each tier. I mean, I know it sounds easy. It really truly sounds easy. It's not easy, to really kind of nail all 8 tiers. So it's hard. And, I've been looking more into strategy and that kind of stuff, how much to stack and not stack and that kind of stuff. I've talked with some tiers players who mass enter, and that's been really interesting to learn from that. But basically, as I'm going through each week, I really simply go tier by tier, and I am literally looking at projections, obviously. I lean into that, but sometimes it's gut feel too. I'm looking at projections. I'm looking at team totals. I'm looking at, now weather, just anything to help me make my decision on who I think is going to be the top scorer in that tier, and who, maybe has a wider range of outcomes that could really hurt you and have a low floor. I'm going to fade those guys. And then obviously the ones that, have a good floor ceiling combination, they're going to be in my core plays. So that's kind of how I do it. Look at projections, look at team totals, and then just really try to go through each tier to hunt for those, highest scoring players.
You mentioned stacking. I mean, do you use, how much do you stack certain quarterbacks or certain wide receivers or playmakers?
Yeah, I've talked about this a little last year. We talked about it a little bit earlier this year. I've talked about throughout this season that I've always operated under the definitely be willing to stack, but don't overstack kind of, and don't force it. Because again, with tiers, it's different from classic is you could have, I'm just going to give an example. Tua may be the highest scoring quarterback in one of the quarterback tiers, but Tyreek Hill might be in a tier with Davante Adams and Christian McCaffrey and Derek Henry, or, something along those lines. And you needed Davante Adams, even though Tyreek Hill still had a really, really good game with Tua. So, there are times where, yes, you want Tua and Tyreek. There's been times this season where you wanted Tua, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle. But there are times where, just because of the nuances of it and the tier in which his receivers are in, you just don't want to force it every single time. I've talked to a guy, did a strategy show, which is on the FanSpeak Network, with a guy, his name's Remy, and he is mass multi, enters tiers, and he does a lot of correlation in his lineups, but again, he doesn't force it in every single lineup, because again, there are those tiers. Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs is another great example, especially with the quarterbacks who can run. They might get their fantasy points or hit that ceiling and be the highest scoring quarterback, and not always make their top receiver the highest scoring receiver. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and we've seen the last couple of weeks with the Las Vegas Raiders where Josh Jacobs and Davante Adams have gone bananas, but Derek Carr's not exactly having a
exactly
big day. Yeah, Jacobs and Adams might be great tiers plays, but Derek Carr's not putting up the same stats compared to Jalen Hurts, Mahomes, Allen.
Exactly. You said it perfectly. And actually, they're a very unique situation, and something I need to look at for Showdown tonight, because their usage is so condensed on the Raiders with those two players. But, they're typically, I don't do a lot of, a receiver and running back on the same team, because I feel like, well, that might be tough for them to both get there and both exceed in like different tiers. But geez, that's one example where that's an exception to the rule, where I would definitely, that I haven't done probably enough this year, is, there might be some weeks where you want both Davante Adams and Josh Jacobs in their respective tiers. So you make a good point.
Now, all that we could do the tiers on which quarterback the Rams are going to start tonight.
What is going on with that? Right. Exactly.
Yeah, Watford's questionable, and Baker Mayfield's been there an hour and a half and may start.
I know he's had enough time to get a cup of coffee, and he may start tonight. So, I know people are down on Baker. As am I, this season. I had much higher hopes for him this season. It's been a rough season for him, but he is a functional quarterback, but it would have to be a very vanilla offense, right? So yeah, that's going to be super interesting to see what happens tonight. It could be just a huge mess.
Might be one to play the Raiders defense. I'm just saying.
That's true. Yeah, absolutely.
They might plug one of the Raiders fans and say, "You be the quarterback tonight."
It's getting there, I think. Yeah.
So tell us about some of the winning lineups you've made throughout the year, because I've heard you've had a couple good winning weeks.
I haven't won any tiers tournaments. I've had some close calls in the $3 contest. Let's see, I finished in 10th place 1 week. That was nice. I've had a couple very high finishes in the $5, the big $5 tournament. Haven't won it yet. Still trying to chase that winner. And then I'm trying to do more of the short slate tiers too, which, for those that don't know, for short slate tiers, that means that's for 4 p.m. the afternoon slate. That's for prime time. So it combines Sunday and Monday. And then of course we had it for Thanksgiving. We'll have it during Christmas. Soon Saturday games are going to start. So there'll be Saturday tiers. Those are just 6 tiers and just one quarterback tier. So a little different nuances to it, because it's just only 2 to 3 games, right? So try to do that. And I had a sweat on Monday night, Dylan. Oh, it was rough. I needed Mike Evans to get the touchdown at the end. If Mike Evans would have gotten the touchdown at the end, I don't know if I would have finished first, but I would have finished in the top 5 on the Sunday, Monday short slate. And he did not get the touchdown. It went to Rachaad White. So that was a bummer. And I had a sweat down to the very last play. So yeah, I've had some good tiers experiences this week, been close, but not hit it yet. And so hopefully it's coming.
Why did Tom Brady and the Bucks wait until the last minute to make everybody sweat?
I know, right? That game was weird too. Yeah. There's been a lot of those games this season. Scoring's down. There's just been a lot of surprise teams that are bad, surprise teams that are good. It happens every season, but this season, whew, it's something.
Well, two things. One, what has been Tom Brady's kryptonite in Tampa Bay?
I don't know what's going on there. I don't know if
The
it's
Saints.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, the Saints. I think he knows the Saints have his number. Yep.
And two, I'm just saying, but what division did the Saints and Bucks play in?
The NFC South.
And that would be another divisional matchup.
Yes, exactly. That's my point. Divisional matchups have not been super fun to watch. I mean, I think they typically, the trend like year to year divisional matchups, hit the under more often. But I would have to research what it is this season. It just feels like, a lot of games like we saw on Thursday night.
Yeah, it feels like a lot of games where like the Ravens beat the Broncos 10-9. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. A lot of field goal fest, right?
Okay, so what would you have changed in some of those like near misses to where maybe you would have gotten the perfect tiers line?
That's a great question. Sometimes it's just variance. In the case of this week, Mike Evans gets that touchdown. I'm sitting very happy on Monday night. Sometimes it is. I think one mistake that I've done is I haven't left myself enough time to really because I do spread myself a little thin on doing like Showdown and Classic, and that's something I said I'd work on this season going into the season, and yet here we are, like 3/4 through, and I still I think I've spread myself too thin. I think honestly, what I'd say is leave myself more time, build the lineups earlier, even though you just have to watch on injuries, news, and that kind of stuff. Just to really be more thoughtful about the way I'm stacking or who I'm giving, the most priority to, my exposure to different players, that kind of stuff. There's sometimes where I get too heavy on a player. Like I think it was last week, I had a lot of good lineups. My cores were very solid, but I was just very, very high on that Cincinnati KC game. And so I just went way overweight on Mahomes in tier 1, and you needed Jalen Hurts. So, I just had lower exposure to Jalen Hurts, way too much exposure to Patrick Mahomes. And, it's sometimes like that where I get too heavy on like a certain player. That would be a mistake of mine. So I think I need to like balance out my exposures better.
Yeah, who knew that Tennessee Titans were gonna fold that much?
I did not think so. No, I liked Derek Henry last week too, and that hurt too. And there was 2 weeks ago, I had a couple good tiers lineups in the big $5 contest, and literally Derek Henry was the only one that was holding me back. So that was another example. I was just too high on Derek Henry that week. And that's the thing about tiers. And when I talk about floor ceiling combo is that, you need that ceiling, but you also really can't have that floor of a player, because if you hit the ceilings in the other tiers, but you have one player like Derek Henry past couple weeks who's just putting up like 6, 8, 10 points, that's going to really kill your lineup,
Yeah, and having these run pass option quarterbacks like a Jalen Hurts, because 1 week he runs for 150, the next week he throws for 350.
Exactly. You don't know. Yeah.
Josh Allen, I don't think Mahomes felt like a bad play and great game script. I mean,
right.
It's not necessarily you made a bad play. It's just that maybe it was just one of them weeks for the Chief offense.
Right. Yeah. Just you're going to have those weeks where the variance doesn't doesn't break right. The process makes sense, but I still think, I need to kind of hedge my bets a little bit more and not all in, but I haven't gone necessarily all in on players, but I need to kind of, mix up my exposure in my player portfolio, let's say, a little better.
I mean, like Travis Etienne felt like a great play in
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, on your Jaguars. Yeah, absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
he was the only guy who didn't do well last in that game.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because Christian Kirk's been looking great. Yeah.
And Amon-Ra's catching everything in sight.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So on the week 14 now, and speaking of Amon-Ra, I think there's one game which is going to intrigue both of us, not just for tiers, but any kind of fantasy format. And that's the Viking Lion game. So with that game having let me see off the top of my
I think it's a 52 total.
51.5 total right now.
Right.
Is there a chance that you will not just stack it, but potentially just game stack it as much as possible?
Yes, I will, but I won't do it. I do about 20 tiers lineups a week. And so, yeah, I would say that I'll do a handful where I a couple where I game stack it and a couple where I overstack it. But again, listen, we've seen what we just talked about it, right? The Chiefs Bengals, that was supposed to be the big total last week. That was supposed to be the shootout last week. We've seen this, we see it every year, but it feels like this year we've seen it every week where the game that's supposed to shoot out doesn't shoot out, and you can get massive edge by, kind of going underweight on that game. And again, obviously, if you're only playing one lineup, I'd say definitely play that game. But if you're playing, even 3 lineups, 5 lineups, do one where you fade that game, because if it goes way under the total, then you're getting massive leverage. So I know the answer is kind of like kind of hedging my bets, or it's not like a very direct like yes or no, but basically I'm going to hedge my bets. I'm going to have a couple just kind of regular stack that lineup, like with 2 or 3 players, a couple overstacking, couple where I just, have the quarterback or something like that, or a skill player, and then a couple where I fade it, or a few where I fade it, because that will be edge if that game fails. So kind of hedging my bets there.
I mean, do you look at because I'm looking at the tier slate now, and tier 1 this week, the full quarterbacks are Allen, Mahomes, Hurts, and Burrow, but I look at tier 2 with Jefferson, Amon-Ra, St. Brown, Chase, Diggs, and McCaffrey, and the Jefferson, Amon-Ra, St. Brown.
Right. So they're in their same tier. So there you can't stack it. I'm sure there's some other guys later that you can stack with in that game. But yeah, if you were building one lineup, you'd have to make a decision. If you were building, 2 or 3 lineups, maybe you do one with Jefferson, one with Amon-Ra, and one with somebody else, kind of, again, hedge your bets.
And here's what makes it even more interesting, because you go to the tier 5 and guess who 2 of the quarterbacks in that tier are?
Yeah, you've got Kirk Cousins and Goff, right? Yeah, exactly. So you can't. So you really, I made a mistake. You really can't, air quotes, overstack that game, because it's not like if you had one in tier quarterback in tier 5, one in tier 5, if the top 2 receivers were in different tiers, then you could do like a guy in tier 1, 2, 3, 5. You can't. It really is just going to be making a decision in tier 2 and 5. And then I believe probably Swift and Thielen or somebody else, Hawkinson is in some later tiers.
Yeah,
I'm still finalizing my core plays right now. So
Swift is in tier 7, Hawkinson in tier 8. So right now.
So yeah, that would be a game stack if you wanted to do one of the players in tier 2, in tier 5 for the quarterback, in tier 7, tier 8. Yeah, you could do that. I would definitely, again, I'm going to be hedging my bets. I will definitely have a couple lineups like that, where, so that way I'm really getting exposure to that game.
So I mean, it is early in the week, but who are looking like your favorite tier plays, and which guys are you maybe hedging your bets against?
Hedging bets against, that's a good question. Well, I'm pulling up the slate right now. I'm still finalizing. I'm going to be posting the tiers show tonight, and the tiers core plays and simulator this evening too. Tier one's always hard with quarterbacks. I'll just run through these really, really quick. I would say, as weird as it sounds, probably fade Mahomes because Denver's a tough defense, and I don't think he's going to have a lot of pushback. The other, I don't know.
Because of Denver's wonderful offense, right?
Yes, exactly. But listen, Mahomes is Mahomes. He can have a 30-point day any day. So, it's always hard to really have a strong fade in tier one because all those quarterbacks are so good. So, still deciding. Josh Allen always has the best floor ceiling combo. But he definitely had a rough outing against Sauce Gardner and company the last time. So, tier two, probably Jefferson would be my favorite, followed by Amon-Ra and Chase. I still love Jamar Chase. I still think he's the number one option there. Tier three, I would definitely fade Nick Chubb. Just don't see, I think that game could get out of hand. And when the game script gets out of hand, Nick Chubb, can kind of get out of the script. Derek Henry, geez, I play him every week and he's hurt the last few. So that one's tough. And Saquon, I probably honestly don't have a ton of interest in the running backs. I'm going to, and because Philly has their, that Jordan Davis back, I believe. So he's tough against the run. So I really don't have much interest in the running backs in tier three. I'm sure maybe a little exposure would probably have more to Kelsey, and AJ Brown would probably be my favorite, obviously. And then let's see, we go over to tier four. You could get Dalvin Cook exposure if you want exposure to that game. I'm a little worried about the Dallas game being such a blowout because the Texans are so bad. So that I'm still deciding there. Probably my favorite plays would be Metcalf, Dalvin Cook, and Christian Kirk. Tier five, probably the quarterbacks you mentioned, Kirk Cousins and Jared Goff. But I also do like Geno Smith too. He's been playing really, really well, and I think he'd be a good tier five play this week. Tier six, you could stack him with Tyler Lockett. Like Mark Andrews this week because when he plays with Huntley targets him like crazy. So love that. Those would probably be my two favorites in tier six. Tier seven, as you mentioned, you can get some exposure to that game with DeAndre Swift. But I really love Garrett Wilson. He's playing amazing. And if you did want to game stack the Bills Jets game, a Josh Allen, Diggs, Garrett Wilson might be interesting, or just Josh Allen and Garrett Wilson. And then tier eight, that's where you got a lot of boom bust guys. You could get exposure to Thielen or Shark in that game.
Hawkinson.
And Thielen, Shark, Hawkinson, and Jamal Williams, who's like just the touchdown monster. So, probably have a lot of exposure rotating through that. But I think the sneaky one could be Najee Harris. He seems to be getting the full workload again there, and has gotten a lot of touches again the last few weeks. So, I think that's a fine play in tier eight because he's got a good floor too.
Yeah, if only the Steelers could just not practice him twice, have him be limited on Friday, and all of a sudden, Najee's good to go. And Jaylen Warren practices all week and is questionable for the game. Somebody explain them apples.
Right, exactly. It's tough. So yeah, that's my early lean, and I'll have all my content out by tonight for tiers, both the article on Fanspeak and show on Fanspeak Network.
Well, I'm just thinking, we did this in week one, and
yeah,
I'm not exactly sure who won it, but I think I won it.
I think you did. Week one was so chaotic. So I can't 100% remember, but I think you did. I'll give you the win there. So if you want to send me another tiers thing, we can do another one.
Okay. Oh, you want a rematch?
A rematch. There we go.
I want a rematch from week 1 when your Commanders beat my Jets.
That's right.
I'm still licking my wounds based on what the Lions did to us last week.
Yeah, but I think Trevor Lawrence is coming around. I think you guys have some stuff, good coach now in place. You got some stuff to be excited about moving forward.
If the Lions can stop sacking him and almost send him into a torn ACL jail.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, you know all the quarterback. You know about quarterbacks or lack of quarterbacks in DC.
Yes, I know about lack of quarterbacks in DC. That is for sure.
Although it seems like the fan base likes the guy behind you more than
Yeah, the t-shirt behind me. Yep. Yeah, he's fun to root for. He's obviously the team believes in him. So Taylor Heineke's a fun one to root for sure.
Yeah, we'll see what happens next Sunday night when you Commanders play the Giants for the second straight time. Somebody explain them apples.
Yeah, exactly. Schedule makers, that was odd, but 1 week break and then we're back to playing the Giants. Hopefully we can get them this time at home and not tie and win.
Who loves ties?
Nobody.
All right, Megan, thanks off and on. We wish your tears and Commanders well. Happy
Thank you.
holidays, Merry Christmas, and
Happy holidays and Merry Christmas to you too. Thank you so much for having me.